Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Prog Connection. And today we are going to be talking about a little bit of a controversy that's been going on in the prog YouTuber sphere. Two of the more prolific prog YouTubers here on the brilliant streaming service. And we are going to be talking about Andy Edwards versus Scot Lade and all that that was started from that. What Andy said that sparked the entire conversation about Neil Peart. And then we're going to get on with a little bit of talking about the video that Andy released recently in reaction to Scott's second video, I believe. So, let's start off. Before we actually start, and Andy, before you start snipping at us, and you start waving your fingers at us and calling us Americans, we are Canadians, so you better be watching it. We were under your supervision for a long time there, so you better be nice to us. All right, so just to clear the air. All right, so Dad, let's talk about it. What do you have to say first?
Let's start with the idea of whether Neil Peart
Mm-hmm.
is overrated.
Yes,
Andy or Scott or other viewers who are watching, I'm not a drummer. You are.
I am. I am a drummer. Yes.
I'm a keyboard player, and so I look. And you and I play in a prog band, Benjamin's
Yes.
Kite. So I can relate to the views of who people would be considering as an overrated prog keyboard player. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't really have an opinion on who's overrated, but I guess some people probably would pick on Keith Emerson, which is very difficult for me, because he's so incredible that no matter how high you rate him, you could not possibly overrate the guy. It's impossible to overrate Keith Emerson. He's not my number one favorite keyboard player. My number one favorite keyboard player is Tony Banks. He's
Mm-hmm.
my main inspiration. And I think in terms of overrated, is some of it to do with what inspired you to play your instrument.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's easy to be inspired by a particular genre of music, but what inspires you to play the instrument that you play? My parents set me at the organ for lessons when I was 8 years old. I don't think they had any particular genre in mind or any particular aspirations for me to do anything with playing organ. They just wanted their children, which is there was three of us. I'm the oldest of three boys. They wanted us to have some musical ability, or let's say put us in music, and hopefully that we would develop love for it. Or they didn't tell us what kind of music to play, and it was whatever the music teacher wanted us to play. And we were all very bad at our lessons, as 8 and 9 year old boys are.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted to do other things. I remember as a 8, 9 year old, I was much more interested in science
Mm-hmm.
than I was in music, and so I didn't practice very much. But as I got into the grades that you get into when you discover music, which is like grade 7 and grade 8, where you're 12 and 13 years old, and you start listening to music, probably the first band that I discovered was Rush.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was in the 8th grade, so when I was 15, I was a Rush fanatic, as probably a lot of 15-year-old kids in Canada were. My best friend was a drummer, and we wanted to start to play some covers of Rush or Pink Floyd. And what am I going to do? Because I don't play guitar and I can't play drums because he was much better than me. Yes, I was playing drums, but very poorly. I'll tell you right now, it was the album, and then there were three. And that keyboard introduction to the album, Down and Out, that first song, that big synth string sounds with the lead synth that inspired me to say, you know what? I had organ lessons when I was a kid and I
Mhm.
could play a little bit, so I'll go back and figure things out. And I actually called up my old organ teacher and I said, I want to have lessons again. But at this time, I want to play piano and I want to do classical piano. I want to learn
Mhm.
classical piano because by then, even though I was very early in my sort of prog career, I understood that most of the better keyboard players had come out of a classical tradition, that they had learned how to play classical piano before they played prog. So I would say that that Tony Banks intro on Down and Out was my inspiration, so that the inspiration is what matters, right? So I would rate Tony Banks as the greatest prog keyboard player ever. But a lot of that is obviously very biased towards the idea that Genesis to this day is my favorite band of all time.
Mhm.
And Tony Banks is my favorite keyboard player. And I don't play exactly like Keep Tony Banks, but a lot of what I do is very inspired. But what he has done with the idea that you create an atmosphere and the composition of the songs is very important. So I don't think that, although I'm not a drummer, I don't think that Neil Peart is necessarily the greatest drummer of all time. I guess I'm saying, in essence, I agree with Andy Edwards that it's too easy to say that this person is the greatest person ever. And other people have just as much technical ability and can play all the stuff. It's more about who inspired you to play that instrument. So,
Mhm.
right. So for me, Tony Banks is my Neil Peart. So I'm again, I'm not. We both love watching Scott Lade in the Prog Corner. So nothing to disparage the point of view that Scott has, but
Mhm.
I'm sort of on the side of Andy Edwards in that I'm
Yeah.
not sure that Neil Peart is the greatest drummer who ever lived on Earth. And I'm not sure there is a greatest drummer ever, just like there's probably not a greatest keyboard player. But if there is a greatest keyboard player, I'm sure it's me. The other thing that's often forgotten, but has got nothing to do with drumming, because I've written so much music in our band, Benjamin's Kite, I would say that Neil Peart is probably the greatest prog lyricist ever and is my main inspiration for writing lyrics. Not that I write exactly like him or anything, but the way he approaches lyrics with kind of like an intellectual point of view on it, I love it.
Mhm.
So Neil Peart may not be the greatest drummer ever, but he's probably the greatest prog lyricist. So,
Mhm.
Zoe, given that you're a drummer, I'll send it back to you to tell me that I'm wrong and Neil Peart is greater than God.
I don't think I can side with either Scott or Andy personally. I don't think I'm kind of in the middle ground here. I think that we can agree that just like Scott said that Buddy Rich wouldn't work in Rush and Neil Peart probably wouldn't work in the Beatles. I don't think that that would work. And just like I don't think Ringo Starr would work with the Pat Metheny group. And so um there are very good examples of why I believe Scott to be right in that regard. But where I am going to come down firmly on is Neil Peart, by no means, is the most overrated drummer in the world. There is no way that is true. As much as I actually enjoy some Beatles songs and no shade thrown to anyone who enjoys the Beatles, but we cannot be looking at Ringo Starr and being like, man, that is the pinnacle of drummers right there. Yeah, technically for rock, pure rock drumming, that was what started that. I guess so, fine. But if not for historical relevance, I don't think I can say that Ringo Starr is particularly deserving of title of or best drummers in the world. I would say he's extremely overrated, considering how big the Beatles got and how big he got as his own projects as well. Again, there are other examples too. I would say Nick Mason is from Pink Floyd as well. Also considered a very prolific drummer in rock. I think that there are many drummers that just outshine him in the same era. But for Pink Floyd, he fits. But when it comes down to Neil Peart, nowadays, when you think about actually who knows him, it is Rush fans, Prog fans, and generally speaking, drummers too. But it's hard for me to go ahead and defend Andy and say, he is. He's right. Neil is the most overrated drummer in rock. It's not true.
In terms of drumming, just because I don't know if the guy is rated very highly or not, but I don't know anyone could defend that. Any drummer could defend the guy who's playing in Metallica. I mean, the drumming is absolutely, from my point of view, is terrible. And
I'm not the biggest.
And the worst thing is the drum sound.
Yes,
which is like
I'm not the biggest on Lars Ulrich either.
It sounds like somebody putting up pieces of paper and hitting on the paper and recording it.
Yeah, and it just got worse on Saint Anger. So
the first, I don't know the album, so I can't give you a name, but those Metallica albums that were starting to become sort of mainstream, popular in the late '80s or whatever.
All, the Black Album.
Yeah. The drums sound absolutely horrible.
I'm not a big fan of them either. Plus, Saint Anger was a terror for me. That's terrible drum sound. So we're not gonna go into that pit of snakes. But I think all things considered, I think that there are far more drummers that you could throw into that mix who are way more overrated than Neil Peart, just realistically speaking. But another interesting point that was brought up between the debate, between this heated argument online, is Scott on his newest response basically said how everyone started trying harder when he came onto the internet and started pumping out entertaining content, which, Scott, I'll hand it to you. You're a very entertaining man. So, no shade thrown on you. But, sir, how long have you been here? How long has he been here? Let's see. How long have you been here, Scott? Let's see. Scott, I spelt your name wrong. He's been on YouTube since 2020. Andy Edwards. How long have you been on the internet there, my friend? Well, as Andy Edwards on YouTube. Since 2013. Alright. And I've been on here since February of 2012. You have some right nerve. I've been here for 8 years longer than you there, Scott. You know your place. Young YouTube channel man. To get the funnies and giggles out of the way, I do think that he has a fair point, and I think that, generally speaking, when he did come onto the scene and started pumping out interesting content and entertaining content, had a very strong caricature, I think that he definitely inspired me and influenced me to try to get a little bit better at recording and making content. Maybe adding a little bit more of a character would be good, because I still think that I have some things I could do better in terms of delivery and how I go on about this content here with the Prog Connection. My own appearances on the Prog Corner as well. and of course, hopefully, branching out into other projects that we will do as well. But generally speaking, he has a point. What do you think, Dad? What do you have to throw in that discussion ring?
I'm just only wondering if you started any of the stuff you've done. How much were you influenced by either the Prog Corner or Andy Edwards channel?
I'm gonna be honest with you, Dad. I learned about Sea of Tranquility and Notes Reviews before I learned about either of how long Andy's been on YouTube. I didn't actually know that he was making this kind of content for this long. But I don't think they have now, especially Prog Corner with his very bubbly and energetic personality. I think Scott delivers a very um, entertaining character that delivers what he's trying to get through to the internet well. If he needs to, I think just like Milo Rossi, who we like watching here, just and Prog Corner Scott over there, and Andy, I'm sure he knows too. If you want to deliver a message and actually teach people something, you got to deliver it with a character so that it's like putting peanut butter on a pill and giving it to a dog. You know what I mean? You got to make it more digestible and easier to watch so that more people will be like, hey, this character is interesting. They'll click on it. And that's what I think he was talking about there, especially when he was talking about the beads on the neck. And Andy was ragging on that too. That was funny. I thought that was entertaining. See, that's a good example of characters going at it, dueling characters, and I think that that's really good for YouTube engagement as well.
What do we think about the what is it? The Emerald
Oh, the
Emerald
Scott and
Council,
Andy
something
going
like.
at it about the whole Rain versus Emerald City Council. Me myself, no, nothing against you, Scott, but I personally prefer to Rain a little bit more. That's just me personally. Dad, what do you think?
I like the Rain stuff better as well. Uh, I listened to the Emerald City. Is it Emerald City Council?
Yep, Emerald City Council.
I just listened to it before we started this episode. I
You
thought it was
did?
pretty good, but
Yeah.
a little bit of sort of a Spock's beard kind of maybe a little bit of that Southern Empire kind of feel to it.
Yep.
Thought it was good, but
Yeah.
I need to listen to it more before I make a sort of a real judgment about it.
Yeah.
But I actually thought it was pretty good so far. But
Yep.
I didn't think either of that or Rain was near as good as my band Benjamin's Kite. So Andy
Mhm.
and Scott,
We challenge
listen
you
to
to listen to that and tell us that you think
yes,
that stuff is
li-
better than ours. We challenge you. So,
yes, listen to our 2020 album Ingenious Cacophonies and
and
listen to
then
the
we'll
whole
see.
thing. Yes,
We'll
listen to
see.
that.
We'll see. We'll see. Is there anything else we want to touch on before we wrap up here?
Yeah, just one thing, Zoe.
Yeah. All right.
And it's a very touchy subject, so you'll have to be patient with me a little bit. I'm sure we have seen before or looked up or whatever, and you can help me out with these things, but both of Scott and Andy are basically roughly my age, right?
Right.
I'm 59,
Yeah.
and I think Andy's a little bit younger than me. Scott might be basically the same age as me. I think it was that we were just watching Andy's reply to the reply to the reply to the reply, or whatever
Yeah.
that was. I think he said something to the effect of Scott looks like he might, yeah, Scott looks like he might have a stroke or something like that. I had a stroke at 56 just over 2 years ago, and it has absolutely not been fun at all. As I've gone through this process, right now I am left side partially paralyzed. So I am still playing keyboards, but with only one hand right now. But I've become sensitized to the idea that people use a stroke as a comedic prop quite a bit. And having just gone through one in 2022 and recovering right now, and still hopeful to have a full recovery, but one never knows. I would hope that these two gentlemen realize that at their age, which is similar to my age, these things can happen to anyone, and they happen out of the blue, and it will hit you like a hammer on your head. So maybe be a little bit, a little bit more cognizant. It's not really a very funny joke. A stroke is not a funny joke. So you've witnessed what I've gone through, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not fun at all. You
No.
would never hope for this to happen to anyone.
No.
It's a terrible thing. So I would hope that I appreciate anybody's sense of humor. You can joke about anything. I don't care. Like, I'm easy.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, particularly as gentlemen who are the same age as me, you know, be careful what you joke about.
Yeah.
You could be the next guy.
Right.
So
Yeah.
they probably know that intellectually somewhere in the back of their brain, but
Yeah.
take a look at me and contact me, and we can chat about it anytime. We can talk about prog, no problem.
Yeah.
I'll come on your show. You can come on ours, no problem.
Always. Always. But we would be happy to invite Scott and Andy onto this channel. Obviously. I mean, why on earth would I reject that offer? Anyway, I think that's all we got. So, thank you all very much for watching. That has been our little take on what's been going on with the Prog Corner and Andy Edwards situation. We know that the Sea of Tranquility also did a response and offered to do with the debate, a third party interview session kind of thing. So we'll see how that offer goes, and we'll see how this drama unravels within the next week. Thank you all very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, share, and subscribe. Thank you all very much for watching. And as always, we'll see you in the next video. Peace.